What's up, humans, and welcome to a new Psicoactivo. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Thank you for the support for the recent interview I did with James Andoli of Engaging the Phenomenon. That was a brilliant conversation. Thank you, James, for your openness and for your expertise, because you're one of the forefront experts on contact. So thank you. I hope we can have another conversation like this in the future. So I wanted to make a video after that because over the past 2 weeks, I had been hearing some rumors that some whistleblower was coming forward and there was going to be a big story. I really had no idea what to expect, but I certainly didn't expect so many different topics to come front and center to the conversation. So we know that Jake Barber and his team at Skywatcher came forward. They talk about their experience and how it changed them on a fundamental level. They talk about being a positive experience. One of the people who vouched for Jake Barber is Lieutenant Colonel John Blich, or Dr. John Blich, who, if you have seen his resume, he's one of the most accomplished people I've seen on the topic, period. Like, dude has medals. He's got PhD, he's got master's degrees, he's done everything. And he's one of the most prepared people for this topic. Something that really caught my attention. I'm not going to name names really, but I was talking to one of my friends that I made over this topic who speaks to Whitley Strieber constantly. And when they were talking, he asked Whitley what he thought about what was apparently coming out. And Whitley said, yeah, they're just waiting for my book to release. And he thought that was an odd comment to make. And this was before Lieutenant Colonel John Blich came forward, because the topics that he covered are really hard to digest for many, but they're there. I mean, the reports from people over decades of abductions and different types of races of NHI making contact with them. Some of these experiences are not positive at all. Some of them are extremely traumatic for the people that suffer them. And it is one of the topics that nobody wanted to talk about because it is really, really dark and really, really traumatic. And that is one of the reasons that I wanted to get James on, because James has had these experiences since he was a kid. And along his ride and along his life, he's continued to make contact with different types of entities, you can call them. Some of them are shadow beings, as he called them. Some of them are light beings. But there are other different types too that we obviously need to discuss. And I know it's difficult. And I know a lot of people are not going to want to talk about it, because let me just give you an example. There are some of these debunkers that talk about this topic in a very reactionary manner. And I've gotten to realize that some of these debunkers express that they had either really horrible nightmares as children, or they were always afraid of monsters when they were children, or bad dreams that they had. And this only invites me to think that maybe, just maybe, they may have had some type of abduction or contact experience that they think it's a dream, but they really did experience it. And it developed a fear and a reactionary stance against any of that. So some of these debunkers may have this trauma and they haven't realized it yet. Others, yeah, I think that they are genuinely paid to debunk. I do also think that they have an agenda. They do. But that, like, gives me a chance to be a little more empathetic towards some of these skeptics or debunkers, because they may have experienced something really horrible that they didn't understand back then, and they decided to leave it in the back of their mind or their subconscious. But maybe they did experience something. Who knows? Because this experience of the abductions tends to be very, very subjective. But when you hear the accounts of people and the different descriptions, it's really interesting to see a person from the other side of the world who gave her an account of a mantid being, and then a person decades later who had nothing to do with this other person describing the exact same. How is that possible? Unless it may have happened, you know? And also with the abductions, there are the implants that we cannot ignore either. There's evidence of that these implants are inside of people's bodies and markings too. I've told you before that I have a friend who I'm not going to name either, who told me when they were being abducted and that they had missing time and they had markings in their body. And I was really spooked when I started hearing about this. And this was before I started doing Psicoactivo on a more daily basis. And I asked them, I was like, are you sure it wasn't like a dream? And that's when they showed me the pictures. And I was like, holy hell, this really happened to them. So it is something that we need to try and understand. But more importantly, try to be empathetic with someone who wants to come out and talk about this and not be dismissive, because you really don't know. Even if it didn't happen to you, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So you need to be empathetic to the person that is trying to open up and tell you about it, and then try and educate yourself and see if there's any way you can help them so they can cope and not have it be such an impact psychologically. Because whenever this happens to people, there's a lot of people that become secluded and they don't want to socialize anymore, and there's even worse outcomes than that. So we need to always extend our hand and try to help people who go through these processes, because it is a really misunderstood phenomenon because it is so terrifying. And we know that the natural instinct from a human, when we find something that we either don't understand or we fear, is to be reactionary and to reject it. And that over time needs to change so we can learn how to understand it better, you know? So I'm just gonna play you a few clips. One clip is from my buddy Neanderthal. This Gustipated 42 on X. This one is from the interview that Ross Coulthard did on Lieutenant Colonel John Blich, Dr. John Blich, about why the abduction phenomenon is the linchpin of the secrecy in the UFO topic. And I want you guys to hear what Dr. Blich has to say. Here is Dr. John Blich talking about abductions.
My government to admit to me is, sorry, we were powerless. I don't think we're powerless anymore. You heard Dave Grush's testimony about, you interviewed him about the crash retrieval process. I know you've recently interviewed some other folks with direct personal experience, not just watching reports, the folks that have been involved in that. And what makes sense about that to me is that the reason why Dave is still alive and Lou is still alive and a lot of other whistleblowers are still alive is, I believe, that we now do have the ability to protect some of us. We do have the ability to shoot down some of these craft and to interfere with this kidnapping abduction process. I consider it a universal right of any being, any living species, to be able to protect their children.
This is a really hard one because abductions, and the majority of them, have been happening to children. So it's only normal that a parent would want to protect their child from someone who abducts them. And it's one of the hardest conversations to have because it is such an ethereal kind of topic that it's not easy to talk about, but it is happening. There's a bunch of data, bunch of testimonies over decades that do confirm that this is happening. And this is a perfect segue to talk about another topic that is really controversial. I don't know if more so than abductions, but and I am talking about something that is inside the lore. There's a lot of lore about it. And some of it may be inventions, some of it may be part of the collective imaginarium, but a lot of it is consistent between different people across different decades that never met each other. And I am, of course, talking about the alien or NHI different types of races, which I mentioned at the beginning. Dr. Blich does talk about his particular encounter and abduction experience. And I want you guys to listen to it very carefully, talking about this very difficult to digest topic about different NHI races. He talks about a very specific one. So listen very carefully. Here it is.
It's not inconceivable that one day you might actually get the opportunity to meet your abductors.
I already did. I already did. A tall, 7-ish foot praying mantis looking being was upset with me and was
this
chastising me.
This was during one of your abduction events?
This is right around the same time as this mountain bike incident. It was the environment that I thought it was in my bedroom on the third floor of a split level house, and it came through a sliding screen door. There was a deck out there, 3 stories up, no stairs down, and just walked right through the door, standing over me. And again, I was terrified, frozen, paralyzed to the bed. And I got a male presence vibe from this being. And he's just looking at me very intently and explaining to me, look, this body that you got, it is just a soul housing group. It's a brain housing group. It is just a machine that your soul occupies for this lifetime. And so, yeah, we're going to mess with it. We're going to get up under the hood and we're going to adjust the carburetor, right? I had just dated myself there. We may swap a couple of parts out, but we can't steal you. We can't steal your soul. We can't steal your consciousness. So quit screaming and writhing around and let us do our frickin' job. And it's like the equivalent of a surgeon telling the patient, stop squiggling, just like the veterinarian to my Labrador Retriever. Hold him down, for crying out loud. I gotta be able to check this tendon. And so I got that very condescending and vigorous instruction. But here's the thing. As proof, there was this image that he put him, and it was terrifying. His mandibles that were kind of behind like a casing or a shell opened up, and he starts grabbing chunks of my cheek, and he's ripping it, and there's blood spattering on the wall, and I'm feeling the tug, and I'm feeling this flesh, and the whole time he is conveying to me, see, We can't get your soul. We could do a lot of damage to your body if we want to. We don't. We're trying to help you. But this is how bad it could get. So stop squiggling around and let us get this done.
Was that physical damage to your cheek real?
No, I felt the tugging, and I had the visual, again, a false, fuzzy memory.
This is really startling for a lot of people, I bet, because it is such an ethereal type of conversation and description too. At the very end, Dr. Blich mentions that no, he didn't feel like he didn't have any actual physical damage, but these beings did pull on him, his soul. That's what they said. And this is where people who are skeptical will instantly jump and say that this was probably a dream. And I don't have an argument against that. It could very well be a dream. The thing is, there are a lot of different accounts throughout history of these mantid type beings that are not necessarily evil, that are somehow trying to help us. Colonel Blich also mentioned at a different part of the interview that he felt like they had some kind of loving connection as a parent has with their children, which is really interesting, I think. But I think the important part of this is that this is one account. There's another type of account that just happened today on the Joe Rogan Experience. Mr. Jason Sands, who was on the program from James Fox, and Mr. Lenval Logan, who was also part of the program, but he was part of the UAP task force that were reviewing different types of videos and data in order to see which was actually real and what was a certain type of craft or object that they caught on camera or different systems. Both of them were in the conversation with Joe today. And I'm happy to say that Logan was not controlling Jay at all. It was a really flowing conversation. They were at all times very open about what they discussed. Obviously, there were parts that they couldn't talk about. For example, Roswell, they couldn't go into details. They couldn't go into any details about either weapon systems or anything that could be classified or jeopardize the United States national security. That is completely understandable. But they did talk about races, which I found really interesting. Jason Sands went on to talk about his experience on that encounter he had at Nellis with this being that had some kind of bluish type of skin that seemed like he had hypothermia and no ears. You guys know the story. He came out first on a Twitter space from UFO intros on UFO Twitter. That was like a historic space, if you ask me, because Jason Sands came out the first time and he talked about that encounter and it left us all speechless. The space went on for like between 4 and 6 hours, and that's the first time I learned to respect Jason Sands, because even though he was coming out on arguably the most toxic platform on the internet, he accepted questions from everybody, debunkers, skeptics, rude people, and he didn't flinch, and he was always respectful. And that is a good tell sign from me, because somebody who is usually lying about this stuff or doesn't believe that this stuff is real, they would shy away and hide out and not respond to anything, as Jason did. So that was a good first sign for me. I know that Jason Sands has been considered like a controversial figure since he came out, but since then, I've been making contact with a lot of people from the UFO community and from the military community and from the intelligence community who know Jason Sands, and some of those people are like really highly, highly skeptical about all of this, and they've vouched for Jason Sands. They've all said, "I believe Jason Sands experienced what he experienced," and I do value that quite a bit, if you ask me. So I believe Jason experienced what he experienced, and I believe he believes that he experienced that. I can't talk for the most recent comments he did about allegedly killing NHI, because that seemed to come out of basically nowhere, because he was like a little blindsided by a question. It wasn't intentional though, because Ryan from Post Disclosure World was the one who asked that. But I he's a good spirited person, and I don't think he did it in order to hurt Jason Sands in any way. But the question was asked, and the effect that it had on Jason Sands afterwards was really, really concerning, because it triggered the PTSD he's been carrying for a while. So I was really sad to see people attacking him when clearly he was in distress. I was really, really moved by the response from Jason Sands after that happened, because he decided to go on Twitter Spaces again and respond to every question again and get insulted by people who didn't understand what was happening to him, really. And many of them still don't. And I value that more than anything, because he was always there to answer to questions. And he understands that there's a lot of people that will keep on venting and will keep on insulting and just talking out of school, really, because there's a lot of stuff that people think they're an expert on when they really don't know what the processes are, especially when you're talking about unacknowledged special access programs, or even some special access programs, because each of them is different. And that is a fact. So Jason Sands came on Joe Rogan, and he seemed more loose and more open to talk about this stuff. I found it really interesting what he said about another alleged and reported race throughout history. I'm talking about, and this is an homage to Hecklefish, Lord Hecklefish. Lizard people. Sorry, I had to make the joke. But yeah, reptilians officially or unofficially entered the conversation because they were spoken about on Joe Rogan. Not that they haven't been talked about on Joe Rogan before, because Joe has had people like Alex Jones or this guy, Eddie Bravo, who's his friend. They're very conspiratorial. They talk about lizard people all the time. But this time it felt different, because this is Jason Sands. This is someone whose credentials have been proven. He's been vetted by all of the people that are looking into this in a more serious manner. And he talked about them. And what he said is really startling. Also, very important, because finally we can like start mentioning them. And whether you believe they're real or not, that is a different story. The fact is that they have been talked about for generations now. And now that they're like on the mainstream, who knows what will happen? Maybe they will be proven to be not real at all. Maybe they will. I'm sure David Icke is happy somewhere telling people, I told you so. If you know about that. So I'm just going to share what Jason Sands said on Joe Rogan about reptilians. Shout out to Red Panda Koala for clipping this. Here's Jason Sands talking about reptilians.
Well, the other third type that got mentioned on mission was reptilians. But every time that they were mentioned, it was really quickly hushed up by whoever else was on the other end of the line. Shut up, don't say that, is what they were doing.
They don't want to talk about the reptilians.
They don't want to talk about the reptilian presence at all. They would talk about the tall whites and the grays being in the lab environments, not a lot, but some. But these reptilians, it was like nobody wanted to talk about it.
Was there any sort of an explanation that anybody give you of why they don't want to talk about it?
No, the only time I got any inkling was that when I, was out of the program and other people started to talk to me about all the different, things. And they're like, well, how many races are there? I don't know. But some people talked about the reptilians. They're like, do you realize that these are evil? And I had to listen to that.
And the thing is, we don't know if it's because of their appearance. You would assume something that's reptilian is maybe a demon or whatever. And a Nordic, where the blonde hair, blue-eyed, is considered like an angel. Or is it that's just our perception? Mm-hmm. But that's what you hear.
Well, yep. every reptile here is evil. Right? You ever seen a Komodo dragon eat a goat? It's horrific. They're fucking monsters. Every single reptile is a monster.
Yeah,
that's here. There's not one cuddly reptile you can hang out with, cuddles with you. He brings you your newspaper in the morning. Oh,
I thought that was funny because the lady's like, my snake sleeps with me every night, and the guy says no. It's laying next to you because it's sizing you up for eventually a chance when it's going to eat you. I was like,
one day it's going to eat you. You have a monster that you feed. As long as you keep feeding, it won't eat you. Yeah, people with pythons for pets.
Well, to give it some credibility, I did do some research after that person talked to me, because I did see that there is a reptilian race that is very malign like that, and they even have, according to what I read, this one race has a penchant for blood. For some reason, it's like a shark frenzy with them. They have
like a real reptile.
It's a euphoric experience for them. Yeah, a reptilian race that does that.
Yeah. So if any of this is true, that probably means that whatever Jake Barber experienced is very, very different from whatever Dr. John Blich experienced, and whatever those two experienced is very, very different from whatever Jason Sands experienced, and from whatever a lot of the people who have reported these abductions and contact stories have experienced over 80 plus years. So if any of this is true, it means that we're dealing with a bunch of different things. Let that sink in for a bit. I'm pretty sure that it's going to take some time for people to get accustomed to this idea and the reality, because we've only seen all of this in different types of science fiction movies. Granted, some of them have been sprinkled with a little bit of truth in there, because I just don't see Steven Spielberg creating both Close Encounters of the Third Kind and E.T. without getting some information of how the grays look like, So I just want to hear what you guys have to say. And recently, Ross Coulthard responded a Q&A, and he also talked about races. I'm not going to play that clip because I wasn't able to find it, but I am going to tell you what he said. He said, and he didn't want to go further than what he said. He said that there were at least 8 different types of UFO shapes and 6 different types of NHI races. If we count, and just from this video alone, how many I mentioned. I talked about this shadow beings, the light beings that are also reported by Chris Bledsoe. There's the Mantid beings, who seem to be not malevolent, maybe not benevolent per se, but then there's the blue-skinned being. Then there's the grays, and the blue-skinned being could be one of the tall whites for all I know. And the reptilians. So that's 6 so far. But there are others reported. I know that Lonnie Samora talked about a very, very weird looking type of humanoid, robotic kind of being that was traveling in an egg, which I found very interesting because we know that Jake Barber talks about an egg, a white egg, And Ross Coulthard did show that video. That wasn't really that compelling, but he still showed it. In hindsight, I do think that maybe whoever edited that News Nation piece should have probably done separate pieces, one about just the egg and just the other interviews by themselves. That would have had a much different impact, in my opinion. But just the Jake Barber interview alone, everybody should watch that. I think that is one of the most important pieces of data that we've had about the phenomenon so far. So you guys should watch that. And even if you don't think that there's anything going on, I encourage you to watch that and let me know what you think afterwards, because I think it was really, really interesting. But yeah, the most fringe topics, abductions, NHI races, different types of craft, psionics, they were talked about over the span of 2 weeks, and they're now in the conversation. I want to hear what you have to say about all of that. What is your initial gut reaction? And after you analyze everything, please tell me what you think about it. What do you think about this abduction phenomenon now being like front and center of the whole conversation? Because that's what happened. And let me know what you think about this different types of races. Dr. Blich talking about this Mantid being, and Jason Sands talking about reptilians. Lizard people. Shout out Hecklefish. And yeah, I know that a lot of people don't believe any of this. So if you don't, and you feel the need to just comment something really rude or dismissive, please save it. I beg you, save it. Please understand, there's a lot of people that have gone through experiences that do believe this happened to them. So you need to be respectful. If not for the whole topic, just because of that, be respectful. It doesn't cost you anything. So yeah, if you like the content you see, please, I'm going to ask you to like, share, comment, subscribe. We're about to hit 15,000 subscribers, so thank you. Hit the bell icon so you can get notified when a new video drops. And if you want to support the channel in any other way, there's a bunch of links in the description. Take your pick. We have a members channel too. And the audio files of the Psicoactivo podcast interviews are on the KGRA website. I'm going to leave every link in the description. Thank you for the support. And that's it for me today. Remember, stay curious, okay? Bye.